Hey there, PyroMonkey crew, and welcome to the 12th, yes, the 12th PyroMonkey Basics tutorial. We have been doing this for 3 months, which is absolutely incredible to me. And first of all, I wanted to start this one off by thanking you guys for all the support, and hopefully you guys have gained a lot of new information from watching all of these tutorials. So today I wanted to touch on something that's basic, but it is also a little bit more of an intermediate concept. And that topic is shape language. So what exactly is shape language? Shape language is the study of and understanding of the way that light interacts with basic primary shapes. Those shapes are spheres, cylinders, and planes or flat surfaces. Now these three shapes make up and compose all of the objects that we see on a day-to-day basis. Now they do interact and change depending on particular circumstances, and not all shapes are going to be as basic as these three, but that is for another video. It's for a more advanced video, and in general I want you to understand that these concepts will hold true even for the more complex shapes. And I'm going to touch on this just a touch at the end just to kind of give you a little bit more guidance, but more importantly I wanted to talk very quickly about how light interacts with each of these shapes, and then I'm going to actually show you this in practice. So first of all, let's talk about the sphere. So spheres are, as you know, a completely round object. Now as you can see in the object, the highlight is going to match the exact shape of that sphere. And as you can see, the midtones and then the shadows also do the same thing. This is a commonly recurring matter that you will see, is that the light in general is going to match the shape of the object. So next up we have cylinders. I would say cylinders compose just about 70% of all of the objects that we see on a day-to-day basis. They compose the majority of the shapes on the body. A lot of weapons and a lot of organic objects have a cylindrical shape to them. Now, cylinders are very similar to spheres in that the highlight is also going to match the shape. Now, as you can see up here, a cylinder's highlight is going to match that long shape that it has. And the midtones in the shadows also do the same thing. All right, and so third, let's go ahead and talk about planes. Planes are probably actually the most complex out of all three of these shapes because they interact with light in very, very different ways. So here we have a plane. I teach that planes essentially will interact with the light in three primary ways, depending on the angle that the plane is at compared to the light. If a plane is angled up towards light, as you can see in the image up there, then the highlight is going to be at that highest point, and then it's going to gradate down. If the plane is angled to somewhat of a middle point, then the highlight may go through the center of the object. And then if it's tilted away from you or at a very obtuse angle, then the highlight is going to be at the bottom of the plane. And so that really is planes in a nutshell. I'm also going to show you some more examples of this, not only through reference, but actually with miniatures. Something else to keep in mind here, and again, this is touching on the more advanced side of shape language, is that these rules will change depending on the material. So the more highly polished the material is, there will be a kind of intermingling of the shape of the light as well as the shape of the object if it's a highly polished surface. Now the more matte the surface is, the more that it's going to conform to the shape of the object. So, but with that being said, I would highly recommend that if you are going to practice this concept, you practice it just by identifying and painting the basic simple object, no matter what type of material you're trying to paint. So with that being said, we're going to hop over to the desk, and I'm going to show you some examples of not only how to paint these shapes, but also some images of real life reference in order for you to gain a better understanding of this concept, because I really want to explain it very thoroughly. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop on over and we will get right to it, you guys. All right, Pyro Crew, so welcome to the table, or the computer. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through a series of images, and I really want to show you exactly how the shape language works on an actual model and actually give you some real examples of the things that I am talking about. And I've got it set up right now so that I can actually blur the image. And I know usually what people do is they say, oh man, you got to squint your eyes or blur. If you have glasses, you can just kind of like take your glasses off, right? And you can actually like see what the image is. But today what we're going to do is we're going to do this on here. And then I'm going to actually show you what I'm looking for. So, and I'm just going to kind of go through each of them and talk about some of the things that I see, because we have examples actually of quite a few of those things that we were talking about in the previous video. So, of course, here we have Magnus. This is, the piece that I placed in with Crystal Brush last year, and he has a lot of really fantastic, complex things going on here. As you can see, there's lots of little detail here, on the legs and on his chest, and just really all over the model. Very, very, very fantastic. Definition, on his skin tones and all that kind of stuff. And so it can be very easy to kind of see how the shapes get a little bit lost. And so that's why I really wanted to discuss this. If we apply a blur, we can see that, of course, the image gets very, very blurry, I guess would be the best way to put it. And so here's kind of a great place we can go hunting for those specific shapes. And so here I have a tool, and I'm going to start to pick things out. So probably one of the major ones that I wanted to pick out was this leg. And as we can see here, it is a very, very nice example of a cylinder, right? And we can see it following that pattern where the highlight is right here. And then, of course, the gradients fall off of that. And actually the way that I painted it was exactly like this. I painted the large shape, and then I went in and I worked on the details. Okay, so another one that we have here that's a really, really great example is his arm. And we can really kind of point this out just like this. And if we draw this kind of course it's not perfect, right? It has this little outward thing, but as you can see, it still follows that pattern of being cylindrical. And there's lots of other little shapes. There's actually like a spherical shape right here, but the main way that the shape is composed is as a sphere, right? And we can see that. And it's very, very nice because it helps us with how we are going to paint it. So one of the other ones that I like to point out is his hair. His hair is actually a really, really great example of kind of a curving cylinder, as we can see here. And it actually grows a little bit. And so at the beginning, I was talking about how a little bit more complex shape language. And this is one of those things, right? If we have a shape where it gets bigger and smaller, essentially it's just going to continue to follow that bigger into a smaller type of shape, right? It makes sense, essentially, right? Like the bigger shape is going to have bigger highlights, bigger shadows. The smaller shape is going to have smaller shapes and smaller shadows. And so essentially what we're going to have to do is just kind of essentially make that a smaller triangle. And this is where you really get, some people consider there to be a fourth shape, which is a cone. And that's really kind of where we get that. But a cone is just a cylinder that's kind of been bent a little bit into a funny way. So I hope you guys are already seeing this pattern. So another one that I would like to talk about here, and it's a little bit bigger, but we can definitely see it, and we can actually see it right here because of this this hollow shape. But his whole chest piece really is just a big cylinder, right? We can see the highlight going down the center, and then the shadow falling off, right? Hopefully you guys can see that. And so really, we could go through and do this in a lot of areas. It's the same with the shoulder pad right here, big cylinder. And the same with this cloak right here. So really, remember like what I said in the other section, a lot of these shapes are really just cylindrical shapes. So, okay. So moving on from that though, we have a couple of these planes, and these are facing up towards the light source at that 30-degree angle, just about from where the light source is. And we can actually see how that highlight is kind of going through the center here. Now, we can also, think about what we were talking about before in the way that it's a highly, highly reflective material, and so it's reflecting that light source in a very, very concentrated area, and it gets very dark and very bright, right? And we can actually see this repeated in a few of these areas, right? And so you can kind of see that breaking down the shape into something that is very, very simple is something that is very, very important, and ignoring essentially the complexity that exists on a model and really only thinking about the big shapes. So with all that being said, that's really our first model that I wanted to show you guys, and I'm going to show you just a few here just because I really want to make sure that we are coming across with all this information the right way. So here we have this big barbarian guy. We've been working on this guy recently in the paint-alongs, and this is essentially where we were at. And again, lots and lots of little detail, and I think you guys probably already see where I'm going to be going with this. And we also have some nice flat surfaces here, and so we're going to go ahead and apply the blur. And so we can very quickly see cylinders. Here's a big one, right? And then it connects to another cylinder, essentially just at different angles. So, and then we can also see one here on his leg. Again, just a big cylinder. On his cloak right here. And even on this NMM right here. This is all one cylindrical shape, but the light kind of has a little bit of occlusion going on. It gets the highlight or the complete shape gets cut out. And so if we were to show you this whole shape, essentially it would kind of go to here, right? But it's hidden underneath his arm. So we're kind of thinking a little bit about the shape underneath and where the light's going to fall and how this is going to block the light direction to some extent. So here we actually also have a little bit of a sphere right on his forehead, right? And we can kind of see that. And, you know, if we're going to just draw this shape, we can actually see it right here. And so we can, it's a very good way to tell and judge the direction of the light because it's right here. We can tell the light is coming from this direction, right? And so that also helps us figure out where the light is going to be falling on all of the other things. And generally we are hoping that that lighting and, you know, everything across the board is very consistent. With that being said, we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the sword here. So we have a few flat shapes. So here's one, and this one just kind of has this little bit of a dagger shape there at the end, right? And there's the other one over here. But again, it's just very simple. It's facing like directly up. And so remember, if we go from 45 degrees to 90 degrees, that highlight's going to be at the top or at the upper portion. And of course, this sword is almost entirely vertical. With this shape right here, though, which is kind of this bigger sword shape, it has a little bit of a different. So even though the shape is very complex, it's still a flat surface, right? And so essentially what we're doing is we're ignoring the complexity. When I look at this shape and I see the shape, essentially what I'm doing is I'm looking at the entire thing as if it's a big square. I'm not thinking about any of the interesting points. Only the fact that it's a big flat thing. Then I'll start to consider the other things. And so I would encourage you to do the same thing. For the Patreons as well, you guys can go back and watch the VOD of me painting this. I paint this in very much so in the style of I'm ignoring all the detail until it gets to about that 80% range. Then I come in and I start to pick out some of the detail. So that is guy number 2. And so we're going to move on to guy number 3. And the main reason that I wanted to share this guy is that it's a little bit of the same thing as the other guys, but a little bit different, right? So here we really have a big sphere, a big spherical shape. We really have a big spherical shape, and you can really see it when we blur the image, right? You can tell it's a big sphere. And again, with this, that is the way that it was painted. It was painted as one big sphere. Then we picked out all the details, right? The other things that we have here are, of course, a big cylinder with this pole. This is probably one of the best examples. That's why, you know, once you get used to painting shape language, painting simple objects actually becomes very satisfying because you don't really have to ask yourself any questions. You know exactly how it should be painted. And that's why I highly recommend people paint Space Marines, oddly enough. Not because I'm a big Space Marine fanboy, but because it's just a bunch of simple shapes, and it really forces you to practice that. Something else that we have here that I wanted to talk about is we have this flat plane at a very obtuse angle, and again, it's behaving those rules that we talked about previously where the light is at the bottom part and not at the top. If the spear was facing up like this, then it would be at the upper part. But because it's not, because it's facing at this obtuse angle, then it's going to behave those rules that we had talked about previously, right? And again, the way that I am thinking about that shape when I look at it is I'm not really thinking about it being triangular at all. I'm really seeing a flat piece of material. You kind of have to ignore even the sculpted detail to some extent when you're learning this, because it's going to help you understand, hey, is this a flat surface? Is this a cylindrical surface? Or is this a spherical round surface, right? And so, yeah, hopefully this is being helpful. So here we have a snake guy. He's already blurred. We're going to unblur him here for a second. So again, we have the snake, lots and lots of detail. We have his cap, which is kind of this nice leather material. And then we have his sword here. And I bet you kind of know where I'm going to go with the sword. It's got this detail right in the center. And I'm kind of bending the rules a little bit, but I'm also not. So we're going to blur him again. And again, you can really see all of the shape language very, very clear. Very, very clearly, right? We have this big snake, and when we blur it, we can tell the snake is just one big cylindrical object. We can tell that his hat is one big spherical shape. We can tell that his trousers and his legs are spherical. It's very, very, I picked this one because it's very, very obvious. His shirt and his arm, and then here, the sword is probably where we break the rules a little bit, but it's a stylistic choice, right? And so sometimes things fit a stylistic choice that we may be making, where we kind of decide that we want something to look cool, even though it may not normally follow the rules. And so I'm kind of showing you this for those two reasons. The other thing that I want you guys to think about is kind of how things are shaped, right? So his whole torso, right? This is one big cylinder, right? And then it's the same right here. It's the same all the way down to his boot. And so on and so forth, right? So again, these patterns just repeat themselves and repeat themselves and repeat themselves. And once you learn this, and once you can start to kind of manipulate it in an effective way, you will 100% find that your work improves dramatically. Another thing that I would strongly recommend that you do is, if you can, once a day, go pick up a sketchbook and draw something as simple as like a mug or an egg, your desk and the way that it's highlighted and gradiated, essentially just so that you can start thinking about the way that these things are lit. And remember, though, you need to do it with a single light source. If you have a bunch of crazy light sources going on, it's really going to confuse what you're looking at and what you're drawing. So I know this has been kind of an extensive discussion about this, but I wanted to give you and show you guys some actual examples. I wanted to show you kind of, the blurred-eyed thing and how it can be an effective tool at looking at the model. And this is also something that you can do. Most phones photo editors have a way that you can blur the image, right? And so if you snap a photo of a primed black image, and there's lots and lots of detail, and you're having a hard time abstracting what those basic shapes are, just go in and blur it a little bit. Not too much, right? But a little bit, and that way you can actually see what those basic shapes are. And of course, you can always reach out to me on our Discord. You can ask me, hey, I'm having a hard time knowing what shape this is. Can you help me out? And I'm always here for you guys. I'm always more than willing to help. And I hope you guys take me up on that offer, because again, my goal in doing all of this is to help you guys improve and help the community improve and contribute the small part that I can. So with all that being said, you guys, we're going to be doing just a couple more parts in this PyroMonkey Basics series. Then I'm going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to be doing airbrushing, and then finally we're going to have a small talk and discussion about color theory, and also about using pure pigment paints, because recently that's become something that's come up, and I really want to show you guys kind of a basic overview of how I use those and how you can use those, and kind of some rules to think about when you're using those paints. So I know this video has been a deeper dive. I hope you guys as a community have really appreciated it. If you guys like this video a bunch and you want to support me, the best way to do that is over on patreon.com. You can support me for as little as $1. If you support me for $5 a month, you get access to a video library of over 35 hours of video content. If you support me at $15 a month, you get access to Photoshop feedback. It's a fantastic, fantastic feature that a lot of you guys, a lot of the Patreons take advantage of. If you subscribe at $40 a month, we have a 1-hour one-on-one session where all my time is only devoted to helping you improve your miniature painting, whether it's technique or ideas or, just talking about painting and, how to improve and how to advance as a miniature painter, whether it's as a display painter, army painter, anything like that. I have the tools and can help you improve. So thank you guys so much again. I will see you guys next week with the airbrushing tutorial. And until then, happy painting. Bye.